We're live.
Hello.
What's up, everybody?
What's up?
Welcome to Burnt Offerings. Welcome to our table. So usually we end up skipping out of lunch, so we got a little food to go along with our cigar and Bible study today.
Yes.
So welcome. For those of you who don't know, we'd like it if you could just share it. You guys will make comments all during the day and coming weeks, and I think the record's like 1,100 people watch it, so it's kind of exciting to see. Yeah, and they make comments moving forward. So we'll be asking some questions so you guys can participate, and we'll be responding to your comments. Hey, Baton Rouge, I see Dustin all the way from here. I can see you.
I have my Jazz Fest shirt on today in memory of New Orleans there.
In memory. So what we do here, Burnt Offerings, we read the verse of the day, which Judge does every day. He puts out a verse of the day and puts his comments on there. And on Tuesdays, though, at Burnt Offerings, we make a special time of it where we unpack it for a half hour, and we probably get more out of it than you wished we would. But we're going to go for it. So that's what we're doing. I'm going to take a few bites and
Dustin said that, a boy, Judge.
I'll let you guys get started. I don't know if you just want to start with the verse.
Yeah.
All right. So today is Proverbs 21, verse 3, chapter 21, verse 3. And it is, to do what is right and just is more acceptable to the Lord than sacrifice. And frankly, this one was quite difficult for me.
Sounds like a
I
judge's
struggled.
verse. Yeah.
I struggled with this one because I was trying to imagine what was being said and what was the intent. And I'm looking forward to your comments on this, because what I ended up with was, God never wants us to be without. He desires us to be righteous and kind.
Huh. Is this in the same section? So I'm thinking of others, not this verse, but is this in the same portion where he talks about, steady plotting leads to prosperity, hasty speculation leads to poverty? I mean, they get into money.
I don't know if it's the same thing, but the Proverbs, though, are not necessarily. It's not. You can't really take it as a chunk. So a chapter can be all over the place, right?
Yeah, it's tons of different advice.
But I think what the proverb means is you can blow it and then go and sacrifice a dove, because the sacrifice was a thing back then. In our case, it would be maybe self-deprecation, saying, "Oh, I blew it. I'm a terrible person." Get it off your chest, and then go back and sin again.
See, I went to the God wants us to have life and life to the fullest.
Right. For
And
sure.
so I read into that he really doesn't want us to be without. He doesn't want us to sacrifice. But he does expect us to be righteous and kind and just.
So, sacrifice versus obligation is pretty common in Scripture. Jesus says mercy and sacrifice, puts those on the other side of it. But again, we're going to remember this is a culture of actual sacrifice.
Well, that
They're
caused me the
they're
difficulty.
and so kind of the idea is that I did what was required of me by the law, therefore I don't have to do these other things.
Yeah.
I don't have to be just. I don't have to be righteous, because I fulfilled what is asked of me. Jesus even says to one of the Pharisees, when he says to him, he's like when he's talking about taking care of your mother and your father and doing all the right things, he said you should have done the former without neglecting the latter. And so it's kind of this almost like I've been to church. Let's make it a little bit. I've been to church. It doesn't matter if I'm a piece of crap now from anything else, because I've done that one thing. And that's what's being contrasted, is those type of ideas.
I even went to the real sacrifices because the Bible talks about it had to be the best lamb and the best that you had to sacrifice.
Yeah.
And so that's where I got, he really doesn't need us to go be without. You can keep that best lamb. That doesn't please him as much as doing the right thing all the time.
Right.
Well, I think doing the right thing. So I think the key when I listen to it, because I can just chase my tail around,
Did that this morning.
Is it? Yeah, right. You go, well, and now you're setting up all these parameters and rules to be able to describe how you feel about what he's saying. And really, I think if we put it in the context of how God knows us, how he knows our hearts and our intent, or what you just said, and I lost the word that made me think this in the first place. You just said something about, knowing our heart and our intent kind of changes everything, because let's read it again with the idea that God knows our heart, and whatever our action is with that intention of a good heart. So read it with that in mind and see if it changes anything.
To do what is right and just is more acceptable to the Lord than sacrifice.
So it doesn't say it's exclusively,
I like that.
right? It
No,
says
that's
it's
the other-
more.
yeah.
It's
Yeah.
more.
Yeah.
So
More is a good word.
well, because you could say that's like someone says, "Well, I don't tithe to the church, but I'm really good to the community," right? Like, okay, well, I don't know that it doesn't have to be an either or
Yeah.
sort of deal, right? It's probably a both and. But if we're choosing priorities, we say it's better to live righteously.
Yeah.
Even go ahead.
Let's say even Jesus says it's better to give than receive. Doesn't mean receiving's bad.
Right.
There just is better. There's more and less in life in the Bible, and I
Right.
think that's a really good way of looking at. Like once Christ pays for all of your sins, like you're in eternity, like we're seated in the heavenlies. It's a past tense thing. It's finished. What moves forward from there is more and less, because now the eternity part's taken care of. Now we're looking at our lives, and you're really looking at permissible versus beneficial, more and less. And so if you're just looking at it, it's like, yeah, you could do it this way. You really could. You can go squander your inheritance without make it bad. You could just be like, all right, I'll do this one thing that's mediocre, or I'll do this great thing.
Right.
And there is just more. And I think a lot of what we're doing in our lives and our journey with God is that abundant life is tapping into what is more with God.
That's kind of what Judge was saying, I guess, when he said it's about the abundance that God has for us, right? So it's not about having less. It's about we make these choices of righteousness or godliness, justice, and there's more in that equation than to do the opposite, right?
It's good. Rob says on here, he says lunchtime fun, and then he said both. So Vince is also watching with us. What's up, Vince? So glad to have you guys.
David came to this conclusion when he was confronted by he was confronted by Nathan regarding his adultery with Bathsheba and the murder of Uriah, her husband. And David says his response in Psalms chapter 51 is, "Hey, God, you don't desire sacrifice, you desire righteousness. A contrite heart." And probably what happened is after his sin, and he thought he got away with it, no one was going to know. He probably made lots of sacrifices. And of course he had a lot of wealth, so who knows how many oxen and lambs he sacrificed on the altar to sort of atone for his sin. And then later on, Nathan confronts him, and he goes, "Oh, I guess the sacrifices didn't cover my sin. What you really wanted was a contrite heart."
Right.
Well, and again, God is more pleased when we do what is right and just, because we then avoid having to make the sacrifice in the first place. We avoid dealing with the repercussions of the sin or the actions that we commit in the process of leading to needing to do the sacrifice. And so for me, it's not just, it keeps us in right standing and right relationship with him and walking in line with who Jesus was and following him, but it also keeps us from the pain and the suffering and the issues that we're going to deal with if we do what is wrong.
Right.
So not only
Good.
is he more pleased with it, but he also is saying, hey, I don't want you to make these mistakes. So then you're in David's position where now you're wallowing in the reality of what you have done, which is lead someone to their death and then have adultery.
If you're pursuing right and just, wouldn't you also sacrifice? See, there's also a lot of flow to this.
Yeah.
Right? So if your heart's like, man, I want to do this right and just in God's eyes. Oh, you know what? In the world I'm living in, I'm going to have provide a sacrifice for my family, at Yom Kippur this year, whatever. So there is a order in which the second is covered, but it's coming from a right place. It's coming from a good spot. By the way, Floyd is on with us as well.
Hey, Floyd.
And he said, off topic, but how is Joe already at the end of his cigar?
Joe gets to these things early.
We started early.
He prays over the what's going to happen ahead of time, and and this is what we're left with. They don't comment about your rabbit food.
No, they haven't seen it.
We
They
had
can't see it.
tri-tip.
I don't
We
think
had
they can see
barbecue, and no judgment over there in Baton Rouge who's watching. But the barbecue is halfway decent in California. So.
Uh-huh.
I think this was great.
So I can't get past. I kind of. You mentioned David. I'm thinking, yeah, Uriah got killed. Put him at the front. Got killed so he can have his way with Bathsheba. But why isn't there a book of Bathsheba? I mean, because from her perspective, this gal's a vixen. I mean, come on.
I know, she's
Dude,
not
you
cool.
in the middle of the day, bathing up on the rooftop when all of them are off to. I mean, I'm thinking this was an entrapment. And David, I'm not kidding.
I'll take that.
I mean, I feel bad. I feel bad for David because, I mean, it's a setup. You've never thought of this as a setup.
Yeah, I actually hadn't. I
Middle
like,
of
I
the
like this
day.
thought. I like this thought. I hadn't thought that. But that
Bathing
is
underneath
true.
the deal. It's not like they didn't have binoculars.
Right.
He was right there.
Yeah.
And she's on the rooftop in the middle of the day. At least go out at night. There's not like there's lights on at night, right? They're
Yeah.
in the old days. I don't know. I struggled. So as soon as you said David and what he was working with, I'm like, poor guy. He's a victim.
Isn't it funny though? Is it like, so we talk about the more and
Book
less.
of Bathsheba. That's what I want to hear.
We talk about the more and less, and maybe I'm opening up a can I shouldn't be opening, but isn't there the difference though between being like, I'm sunbathing nude and I'm going to have sex with someone else? Like even the more and less, like I'm not, it doesn't make what she did good,
No.
but it does make it to there is the point of acting out, you know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like that makes it like, that's the idea of, that's less. We're going with more, this is less.
What we don't, what we probably need to consider though about Bathsheba is the king, who had all power,
Yep.
approached her, and said, "Hey, come on, let's hang out."
Well,
I don't
hanky
think she
panky.
probably felt. I mean, it's like it probably is a little like, come on, it's a little like some of that stuff that's gone on in Hollywood, where
Yeah.
there's some executive who has an intern. It seems like we had a president at one time that did something like that.
Oh, wow.
No.
A few presidents like
That kind of
Yeah.
power. That kind of power is hard to say no to. So,
It's true.
Cigar.
big
I was
stick.
reminding you of the.
oh,
Is this the Clinton or is this
Oh.
the?
it's not the Clinton.
Well, it's even Jesus says, talks about the type of person who forces their way in on a weak-willed woman.
Mm.
Do you know what I mean? Like, because there is some element of being masculine in a man where there is an expectation. There really is. I feel like where God's like, you're not wired to just be caught up in your emotions.
Right.
You're really not. Like, you have some ability
Yeah.
to be like, hey, be a little sober here. Like, I get it. She's hot and she's naked. Don't.
Yeah,
You know
chill
what I mean?
out.
Like, but it is this. That's why it's kind of this like, but you get it. It's not just like, how could you? Like, oh, we all know how it could. Like, that's not the hard part. But then there was this expectation of like, I get it, but don't. Like, had a bunch of guys have moral failure, guys that, discipled, and, had different elements in their life where they had affairs and stuff. And we just talked about it. I said, listen, part of being a man is wanting to sleep with all women. Part of being a godly man is not.
There's none.
That's the difference. It's hard, but I get it.
Robbie Champagne, thank you for these Project 40s that you donated to the group.
Thank you for it. I appreciate it very much.
You don't-
Oh,
it was a
oh,
really
you said the
small
group.
It was a group of one or two. No, thank you, Robbie.
Floyd said, I think I'm going to say this right. I hope there was a Trappist monk. Scott, you ever heard of that?
Yeah.
Okay, I haven't heard. Okay, I don't know if I'm saying it right. That said, I don't always know how to please you, Lord, but I think the fact that I want to please you pleases you.
There you go.
That's a
Yeah.
great
That's
way
the
of saying
heart
it.
thing that I
Yeah.
was saying.
Yeah,
It's
that's
like
exactly.
where are we coming from? What's our intent? And God knows the heart.
Exactly.
Right.
That's exactly right.
Isn't it weird that I would say this to people? I said, if you had to pick somebody doing the wrong thing with the right motives versus the right thing with the wrong motives, I intuitively go with the wrong thing for the right motives.
Mhm.
I can resonate with that better.
Sure.
But the right thing for the wrong motives just feels disgusting. It's like,
Well, Jesus gives that parable where there's the two sons, and he asks them both to work in the field. And the one son says, I can't work in the field, or I won't work in the field, I'm not going to do it. But then ends up doing it later and working in the field. Then you have the second son who says, I'm going to work in the field, I will do that for you, Father, but never ends up working in the field. And he asks which son did right by his father. And everyone answers the first son, that although he's basically told his father, I'm not going to work, he ended up working in the end.
Right.
And so that's, I think, where you're going with that.
Well, that's why that Trappist monk thing, you can't take it too far because good intentions only go so far. Right?
It's true, right?
So I see it, but it's like any other truth. You can't extrapolate it out too far because then it becomes permission to basically do nothing.
Right.
Right.
It's the problem with even Jesus' parables is that I tell people, I said they're not completely analogous.
Yeah.
Like they meet a point, but they can't just like you said, extrapolate them all the way. I'm like, oh, this is my new. No, that's why there's lots of scripture.
Right.
Like
I've
this
never
will
heard of it.
talk about
I
this
like
one
that.
section, you know.
Yeah, it's like saying, well,
I'm
God
not
is
gonna- I'm
love,
not gonna be here long
and so
enough.
under the umbrella of love, everything is okay,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, what if
And
Jesus-
that's taking love first of all out of context, and it's taking it too far,
Yeah.
right?
Yep. It's true.
So,
Any thoughts on that, Devin?
Yeah, so I had a few things. I was quiet because I
I can feel the wheels
Yeah,
turning.
Oil
those.
there was smoke coming out of his
Yeah,
ear.
maybe oil that a little bit.
a few things. I had to look up to make sure I had the name right because I actually had it wrong. I'm in a class right now looking at the ancient Romans, and it was 500 years after David's kingdom.
Okay.
They have a story, and there were some traditions with the Romans where they pretty much made fun of David and Bathsheba.
Oh,
So there was a
really?
gal.
The Romans did?
Yeah, so there was a gal, her name was Lucretia, and she was supposedly like the best housewife of them all. And there was the mythos of it is these guys, all the like proper gentlemen were together, and they're like, well, let's see what our wives are doing, see which ones are the best. And they sneak around and they like peer into each of the houses. Well, all of their wives were hosting each other and drinking and having fun, and they're like, wow, all our wives are scumbags. And then one dude's like, well, my wife is the most honorable, right? She is at home, and I guarantee you she is still late at night as we're doing all this, she's still spinning wool. So they went in and they're like,
Ancient
wow,
Romans, that's
wow, she's like the most honorable. Well, because of that, he won, and they got to host the people. Well, then the chief guy, his name was like Sextus Tarquinius, I think, one of the chief dudes in the town.
Great name.
Yeah. Then went and forced himself on her, and she just straight rejected it all, to the point where then when all the city, like policemen or whatever they would be at the time, or legates or whatever came, she ended up, as a thing, committed suicide because of it, and was like, because my honor's restored, I forced against it, no matter what his position of authority and all that. And that was constantly used to then persecute the Jews and the Christians. It was like, even your king, his queen, your greatest king, his queen was just nothing, because she couldn't
She gave
stand
in,
up to it.
Yeah.
But ours could. So that was something that popped into my mind. But
So that's pretty intense.
That was a
But
lot of
what does that
context.
mean?
Yeah,
How do you?
but
how-
give us.
sorry,
do you-
that
how do you
popped
marry
into my
that?
mind. That popped into my mind. A little random thing with that. But yeah, they would make fun of that. So it wasn't just
Interesting.
victim.
So
David.
we're stacking this on top of the book of Bathsheba.
Yeah.
Comment. Ah,
Because the Romans were saying there's a nobler woman out there than Bathsheba. David wasn't really the victim. There was things in place that could have been stopped there.
The beauty of that, of the story of David and Bathsheba, is this: that you can't earn your way into God's favor, because who became king after David? A product of David and Bathsheba,
Yeah.
Solomon,
And God says later that
What,
David was a
there's-
man after his own heart. I think that's the.
second son.
second or third, right?
Second.
He lost his baby.
He lost the first child.
And this week I'll be preaching in Romans out of God is working all things together for the good of those who love Him. And the New NIV says God is working in all things, but actually the word there is synergeo, where we get the word synergy from. You can't take the together part out. The whole point I'm making is that Romans might be saying this, but the reality was who God is. He takes the good, He takes the bad, and He works it for our good.
Yeah.
Meaning it's about Him, even when we blow it. And He's saying, so where they're saying like, oh, she wasn't that great, and I'm like, oh, you think we're worshiping Bathsheba? We're worshiping the
Right.
God who takes mistakes
And make
he
something
Right.
great out of
makes
it.
something great out of it.
Yes,
That's the big
100%.
difference.
That is the big difference.
Unless you're Uriah, and then it's
But yeah,
That,
it's
he's doing fine right now.
oh, he is. He's doing.
Pretty
fine.
sure. I'm pretty sure he's dancing on streets of gold. Going, I didn't like that woman anyhow.
I knew she would cheat. I mean,
I kept telling her stop bathing at daylight.
in the middle of the daytime.
You know when David
She
goes for
never
his
listens.
walks.
Yeah. You know
so
when he goes for his
something.
walk. Oh shoot.
before that, I kept getting sidetracked wanting to find more context. 'Cause that story popped into me. So this is separate. I had two things kind of to say.
The other was separate too, but this is separate from that.
Funny, yeah.
Okay.
You guys,
Separate.
I was letting you guys talk because it was all good stuff. And I was just trying to
All right,
find
go
some
ahead, Devin. Get it out. Get it
So
out.
the next verse after, so 21:4 is the haughty eyes and proud heart, the lamp of the wicked are sin. So that's in regards to do righteousness and justice is more acceptable to the Lord than sacrifice. Haughty eyes and a proud heart, the lamp of the wicked are sin. So my mind went to then, of course, not just the and or with you have sacrifice and the justice. It's saying it was pretty much outlining a lot of what we talk about. You'll have these guys with the proud hearts, and it is their lamp, like they're shining. Look at all the donations I give to the church. It's their lamp. They're shining it as their pride.
Sure.
But that's just the Lord says, yeah, that it's less acceptable than the righteousness and justice that would truly come, and then sacrifice is a byproduct of that.
That's good.
That's why a lot of places will have the tithing after the service, or they'll do it online because it's anyone when the lights are on can put however much in the plate, and it's like, hey, here I am. Like you got Bezos, for example, donates a butt ton, and his divorced wife donated even more just to show him up. Well, I mean,
Of his money.
Yeah.
Oh, no. In all fairness,
They
their
did,
money.
they
They
worked
started
together.
it together in
But-
the garage. Yeah. Okay.
That was just a pissing
Sorry.
contest between them of who can donate, and there's plenty of people out there who will think he's one of the worst guys around. Him and like Bill Gates, all the people who hate Bill Gates, and it's like, well, he's donating more money than any of us. But that's just his proud heart there. There's not a righteousness and a justice.
Yeah.
And
So
then
may-
even more for wealthy Christians or those who
So
try and
maybe you're
put it out.
hitting on the answer to a question I have, which is, why is that what he's saying in the verse more important than sacrifice?
Why
Because if he knows your heart, so the verse itself says that it sort of diminishes sacrifice.
I think it's diminishing.
Why is it?
I think it's
though? Why are we-
diminishing religious obedience. Not that it's bad to be obedient or bad to be religious, or even like to have this. I think you think about anything else. It's like the idea of we've been doing things mindlessly, even as a Christian, where you're just kind of like, these are the checklists.
Yeah.
Where Jesus would come along and be like, hey, that's why it's more, not bad. Like what you're doing is fine, but God's always been after our heart. It's just that's who He is. He wants our heart. It's like He doesn't want the praises from our lips. You know what I mean? Like He wants our heart. And I think that's going after this idea of doing what's right and just is kind of this heart thing. Because that means you have to do in the moment, you have to assess, and you have to do the right thing or the just thing. And often those are very hard, and it has to come from a place in the heart. So I think that's why He's not diminishing sacrifice, but He's just saying like, yeah, cool, like that's good, but really
But
what
this
I
is
want,
more
this is
acceptable.
better.
And
Well,
is
it's why
this-
Do you think he's saying? Go ahead, Jason.
Well, it's why Jesus reprimanded the Pharisees. They did the sacrifices.
Yeah.
They followed the letter of the law. They did exactly what they were supposed to, but they were rotting internally. They were not righteous or living just. They were actually living for themselves.
Right.
And so what he's trying to say here is stop getting stuck in the monotony of checking the boxes, like you said earlier, Joe, of going to church and doing your prayer group just to check the box. But get in line with who I am. Get dialed in with who I am and become a part of me. That is what it's all about. Yep, these things are byproducts of that instead of these things being the ultimate end-all, be-all. So I look good or I look right, so I become a Pharisee. Where on the outside I'm clean, but on the inside I'm filthy.
So I wonder if he's saying, how do you gain justification? How are you justified? Are you justified by making a sacrifice, or are you justified by doing the right thing? Right? Obviously, we know in a broader sense that Jesus is the only one that can justify us fully. But the Bible also says, in the New Testament, it says that we're to live out our salvation with fear and trembling. It's this idea that we live up to the justification that we've received, right? So I'm wondering if he's not saying, it's not an either or, but he's saying if you're seeking to be justified by going to the altar and giving a sacrifice, that's not near good enough. What you need to do is treat your fellow man with love and kindness honor and respect. And
Well,
so
think
on.
about this. They're operating inside a covenant, right?
Right.
This is pre-resurrection. I mean,
Yeah.
they're not in a spot we're in where Jesus paid for it all. So in their mind, they're
Right.
like, I want to be right before God. I want to do the right thing. So this is going to be a right standing with God. And Solomon's saying is actually a right standing before God is doing right, doing just. And again, remember, this is their world is everybody had like a business. You raised cattle, you made something. Justice a lot of times isn't just like, law. It's like along the lines of like, hey, I'm about to make an exchange with you. Right? We're about to exchange or something along those lines, and doing something just like I want to make sure I'm being fair with you. Like I want to make sure our exchange is fair. And those who had more versus those who had less had power. So it's a real pragmatic element.
Sure.
Where it's like I'm going to do the right thing and I'm going to do the just thing. A couple of responses here. So Rob says back to Romans 8, he says this. He takes the good, he takes the bad, he takes them both, and there you have the facts of life. Laughing face. And then Lisa said, I think sacrifice could also be literal, sacrificing the lambs, which we're all connecting with, which can be done without actions, heart, etc.
Yeah, you're just going through the motions.
Yeah,
Right.
like you said, and we've talked about that with our Holy Smoke. What we really are seeing is people changing, and that's what's neat. You can just do the sacrifice and show up at 4:00 on Thursday,
Right.
but that doesn't do it. It's when we see people changing and living differently, and what we feel as we leave and how we live is what
What's
makes
at the
the
heart of the
difference.
sacrifice?
Yeah,
What,
yeah.
the real change, and not
Yeah.
just action, like
Just
motions.
being there,
Yeah.
Yeah.
putting in the time,
showing
Yeah,
up.
exactly.
like going to church, showing up.
I just showed up, so
Yeah.
I'm good now. I didn't think Joe mentioned that earlier. So we go to church. I did that. I mean, think about it. Unfortunately, I think in America, the sort of the high watermark of a person who's really a good Christian is they go to church.
Yeah.
If they go to church and they give money, that's the high. I mean, you are killing it as a believer.
Yeah.
That's not true.
Well, and in America, it's like even we say that you go to church, but
How many go to church?
well, and what's the high watermark? Isn't it how many times a month?
Not even per month.
2.5.
Yeah, it's
One every 6 weeks. One time every 6 weeks.
And
In
a person will say they
America,
go
it
to
says
church.
they're
And
regular
they'll say,
church
I go to
attenders.
church.
Yeah.
Here's the hard part is, and I'm not trying to, again, going it down a different road, but the hard part is that in church, we pastors, we count attendance and giving. So then we're going to tell people, don't make that your scorecard. It's hard if that's the thing that we're like, this is the,
Yeah.
we have to change the scorecard. You know what I mean? If we're letting believers know, like, we want to know you're here and we want to know you gave.
Yeah.
So we have to make sure there are other
And it's-
metrics
Yeah.
that really
the
matter.
life change metric is difficult.
It's
'Cause
difficult.
There's a lot of,
It's hard.
There's a lot of judgment there.
Mhm.
But I tell you, when it's clear, it's clear. There's no judgment.
And that's why-
when you see it happen and you see the firelight, and then they're on. You know when it's real.
Mhm.
You know.
And that's why it says more acceptable.
Yeah.
It's not that you shouldn't be going to church and you
Right.
shouldn't
Yeah,
be tithing.
yeah.
Right.
We need that too,
Right.
but this is more acceptable.
Yes.
Right.
Lisa,
Exactly.
Lisa commented, don't just talk the talk, but walk the walk.
Yeah, pretty
Yeah.
much plainly said.
Well, and that is for sure through Paul's letters in the New Testament. That's woven all the way through. So we need to actually live what we say we believe. Belief is not real belief unless it affects how you behave.
Right.
Right. You say you believe there is good one God. You say you believe there is good God. There's one God, good. Even the demons believe that.
Right.
And shudder.
Yes.
Like that's great. You know what I mean? Like there is an element where, and again, I when he said like do what's right, it's such an ambiguous term, in the sense of it. But it makes me think of that means there's moments where we're faced with doing what's right.
Yes.
That's what I think of. It's not like the every day. It's like that moment. You're like, got a chance right now.
Right.
What's the right thing to do? Are you going to do that? And I think that's what this is getting at. It's like, all right, what are you going to do when it's your moment?
Right.
Different verse than usual. Did we add on to it at all?
Oh yeah,
for you.
it
I
sure
mean,
helped
'cause-
me a lot because I'll tell you what, I struggled.
So you got
a
it
lot
figured
this
out now?
morning. Yeah, certainly more than I did this morning at 6 a.m. when I was half asleep.
Right.
The minute when we read it, I was just like, I mean, the only thing that came to me was, either way you go, God knows your heart, and I'm like, I don't know how that even works in here. And I go, I wish there was like more to the verse or like a connecting verse so that I could.
Imagine
Like,
how
what's the point?
imagine how meaningful these discussions are to me. Not only with two pastors, but people that I respect, with three pastors, and people that I respect. But you know, when you're choosing that and you're trying to synopsize it into something, you know, we've talked about this before, and I've
To a
had people say to
sentence,
me, you know,
yeah.
I appreciate one line, maybe two lines, because if I see 10 minutes worth of reading, I'm not going to read it all.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, and so. I really appreciate these times where you bring that out, and it helps me a lot.
Good.
But at 6 a.m. in the morning is
Something to add for you, because you did bring
You
it
wrap it
into-
up tight because
You did bring it into Bathsheba, and to tie it into this Proverbs 21, I want to read you the 21:9. It's better to live in a corner on the housetop
Oh, jeez.
than in a
And
house
with
shared with a
contentious one.
quarrelsome wife.
Yeah, right.
So,
All right.
hey,
With that,
There's some wisdom.
Uriah, he did make it out well in the end.
this comes from somebody who's not married, by the way.
FYI.
so
All
much
right.
for all the women that are
Right.
watching.
Bye, everybody. Happy
Every
naked,
Tuesday at noon.
Tuesday, thank
happy
you.
naked
Thank you. Share it
bathing
with everyone.
during the day.